Hey, what's up everybody? It's Kellen here from Start Your Systems, and welcome to another video in MXGP Pro, where today I will be reviewing the 2018 MXGP of Bulgaria as I ride the 2017 MXGP of France track from Ernée. Bulgaria hasn't been on the MXGP schedule for the last 5 years, I believe it was, so it's not in any of the MXGP games, or else I would play it obviously and then talk about it in these videos, but as it's not a part of any of the games, I just chose a track that is not going to be in the upcoming tracks left in the season, and that's Ernée, so that I can play it and talk about Sevlievo, and yeah, you guys maybe won't get too confused, although of course, you know, there's that one guy on the video that commented a couple weeks ago, he's like, what, this is BS, you didn't talk about the game at all, this isn't a review of anything. And apparently he doesn't have ear holes and didn't realize that I was talking about the real-life MXGP, which is what I'm doing. So again, if you're here and you're listening, I am going to be discussing the real-life MXGP of Bulgaria that happened this past weekend. Got it? Good. All right, so start off with the MX2 class. Just go in kind of chronological order here, but pretty much the championship battle between Paul Jonas and Jorge Prado is like the really kind of one to watch or thing to pay attention to right now in the MX2 class, and it was almost a, you know, not going to happen anymore type of battle, but as of late Paul Jonas has kind of turned it around. He had like a big slump for a couple weeks, couple GPs. Prado got the points lead, pulled out a nice gap on him, and now Jonas has not really clawed it back in per se, but kind of made Prado work for it, or, you know, start working for it. And in Sevlievo, they started together. Jonas kind of stalked Prado for a little bit, made a good pass on him in the first moto, and kind of just, I guess, checked out for the win in the first moto. Like, no real immediate pressure from Prado behind. I think he was, you know, within maybe 5-6 seconds the whole moto, but it was Jonas's race once he got around him, and kind of coming back around is Jonas, because like I said, it's been a weird stretch for him, just not being the same guy that we thought. However, Prado, and I saw someone theorize that maybe he's been kind of saving himself to be, you know, the better man in the second moto, and unfortunately we didn't really get the chance to see whether or not that was true, because once again they started together in the second moto, and Jonas is putting the pressure on Prado for the lead, and I think it was still on the first lap of the race that I saw this happen, but Jonas, poor Thomas Gerolson right there. Jonas coming down right before the finish line, there's like a double/triple that they were all kind of double singling to the inside, and it was like on a downhill into a weird corner, and Jonas just hit a slick spot, grabbed a little bit too much front brake in it, and slid her down. And like I said, this is why I don't think it was on the first lap. I think it was maybe after the second lap of the race, but slid it down, got up, and was in fourth, but it kind of tweaked the bike a little bit and lost touch with Prado by that point and never really got to him again. But that didn't mean that Prado didn't go unanswered that whole moto. He actually received quite a bit of pressure and nearly lost the moto, because Hunter Lawrence was giving him the battle of a lifetime, and that was good to see Lawrence kind of get back into it. Lawrence has had a really up and down year. I know that he was, you know, signed with a really long-term deal with Geico/Honda. You know, like Honda signed him, but it's really meant to be for Geico next year, and I think they really expected him to be a world championship contender this year, and it hasn't worked out through injuries and just kind of, I guess some things were out of his control as well with the team and whatnot, but you know, good to see that his form is kind of back, and he really gave it to Prado that second moto. Like, it looked like he was going to pass him at any point to win, but just couldn't make it happen. Prado hangs on, wins the GP, and extends his points lead a little bit, because Jonas ended up finishing third, so he went 2-1 to Jonas's 1-3, and as mentioned, that extends the points lead a little bit for him, so he's now out to 30 points on Jonas with 3 rounds to go. So it's looking good for Prado. That doesn't necessarily mean that Jonas is out of this thing yet. I think if Prado has a bad weekend in any of these 3 weekends, then of course Jonas is right back in it. But if Jonas can, you know, even do as little as claw away a few points at the next GP, it starts putting the, you know, more pressure on Jonas coming down to the end here. And did I just say if Prado can do it? If Jonas can claw away points from Prado in the next GP, it puts more pressure on Prado going into these last 2 GPs, because Prado's never won a MX2 or MXGP class world title, of course, so he is in kind of unfamiliar territory, which isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes not knowing how to handle it is the best medicine, because then you just kind of go for it and it ends up working out. But you know, if that pressure starts getting to him, the nerves get to him, he starts thinking about it too much, those last couple of motos could end up not being the best, and Jonas could still be in a good spot to capitalize. So it's nice to see that Jonas is at least giving him a semi-fight down here to the line, although Prado has just responded emphatically, has won the last 4 GPs now, and looks like, I mean, it really is going to be pretty hard to take him off of what he's doing right now. He's just being consistent, not crashing, knows where he is championship-wise. It looks like he just has the mindset of a champion already, which is pretty crazy to see for someone who looks like he's still in grade school, I swear. But yeah, cool to see Prado pick up another win. Lawrence ended up 3rd on the podium behind Jonas after, I think he went 5-2 or whatever it was. And then behind that was Watson, I believe. And yeah, a couple of highlights, I guess, to point out for any American fans that don't pay attention to GPs very often was the continual rise of Marshall Welton, who ended up going 7-7 for, I believe, 6th overall at Bulgaria. He rode great. He had good starts. Got passed a bit, but I think that he's maybe just not quite the same level as those guys yet. He's had a really up and down season as well. And it's cool to see another American up there fighting, and that's kind of why I chose to ride as Darian Sanai here, because Sanai has already been confirmed as signed and riding for Monster Energy Kawasaki in the GPs again next year. And I really think he could be a title threat next year. You know, try to take it to Prado if he wins this championship, and Thomas Gerolson will still be over there. So it's going to be really cool to see next year Sanai, how he does. Of course, Welton, I'd have to imagine, is working himself into a ride at this point with these recent rides that he's put in where he's just rode fantastic. I just don't see why a team wouldn't want him at this point. But yeah, again, just cool to see Americans doing well in the GPs. Onto the MXGP class, and I mean, are we surprised? Again, it's just Jeffrey Hurlings goes 1-1, makes it look honestly kind of easy. He didn't get the whole shot in either moto, I should say. He did start at the front, but he didn't get the whole shot in either moto. Made real quick work of Tim Geiser, 2 corners in the first moto, and then started behind Antonio Cairoli in the second moto. I mean, got right up to him before the first lap was over. He was through and he was gone. I mean, just nobody's on Hurlings' level in that class right now. He seems to be able to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. I mean, the confidence that he looks like he's riding with is incredible. And at this point, not only do I think he's going to win this world championship, he may just go undefeated the rest of the season. And he picked up his 81st career GP victory. Of course, MX2 is included there this past weekend in Bulgaria, and he still has not won his first MXGP class title. So I think that tells you a little bit of something about how long he was in the MX2 class. And of course, I don't think KTM wanted him to move up and dethrone Tony per se, and then he got hurt a lot, but still 81 GP victories and still no MXGP title yet for Hurlings, but it clearly seems like it's coming. Geiser looks like he's kind of a renewed man of late, I would say. He looked pretty darn good this weekend. Looked like he was feisty. Didn't really seem like he had much for Tony in the second moto. Like, he got to him and then didn't pass him and then faded off a little bit. Clearly, Cairoli isn't as hurt as he had expected from that crash last weekend in Switzerland. But, yeah, Geiser overall, I just felt like looked very Geiser-ish. And I would say that Bulgaria, Sevlievo, I mean, he's not that far away from his home in Slovenia at that point, but that type of track looks like something that Geiser would really excel at, that really slippery, slick dirt type surface. I've seen him ride tracks like that before, very fast. So I wasn't, I guess, shocked to see guys are riding that well again, but it's good to see him back. I mean, he's just been through the ringer with injuries the last couple years, and hopefully he's back to 100% soon. One thing I feel like I can point out about the GPs is, while those guys do get hurt, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen, it's pretty cool to see how many guys are still healthy here at the end of the season. I mean, it's, you know, Geyser, DeSalle, Fevre, Paulin, I mean, you name it, and they're probably still healthy here at the end of the season, which is pretty cool to see. I mean, those guys ride some pretty gnarly tracks, roached out tracks for sure, and the fact that they're able to keep it up on 2 wheels and not get hurt and make it a full GP season, I think is pretty good to see, at least in my opinion. But yeah, Geyser looked good. DeSalle was good, not great. I think he ended up 3rd overall. Cairoli ended up going 8-2 for 4th. I think DeSalle was, what did he go, 3-4 or so? But yeah, I mean, just literally nobody touched Hurlings. He was out of there, lead and gone. And again, Bulgaria isn't necessarily a track I would consider like a Hurlings strong suit. It just being like pretty much concrete, slippery, slick, hard pack conditions, whereas, you know, Hurling seems to be a guy that hangs it out and rides really well on loose dirt. The fact that his game is as good as it is right now, where he can ride that strong on a track like Bulgaria, it's kind of scary news for the rest of the MXGP circuit, and I don't necessarily see anybody in MX2 coming for a long time that could dethrone Hurlings, which I really do feel like the full, you know, next changing of the guard is here, with Hurlings taking over from Cairoli. And really at this point, you know, Hurlings' worst enemy is himself. You know, he definitely crashes. It's not an unknown theory there. He crashed himself out of not being able to race a GP this year, even with a broken collarbone. But as long as he stays up, shoot, I have a tough time believing anybody's going to challenge Hurlings for a world title for the many years in the foreseeable future. He's still pretty young. He has a lot of GP experience to his credit. Doesn't sound like he's particularly interested in coming to the United States anytime soon. He wasn't the best at Supercross when he tested with KTM, so I think he's perfectly content to stay in Europe and win many, many world motocross titles, probably be considered the best motocross rider on earth for quite a bit, and rack up some serious paychecks along the way, I'd have to imagine. But down to the wire here, I mean, he has a 70, I think it's a 78-point lead if I read correctly, now on Cairoli, and with nobody seemingly getting in his way, I just don't see how he loses the title. He spoke in his post-race press conference about how, you know, he's been in this situation before, massive points lead, and he got hurt and ended up losing the title. And of course, he's referencing being up by over 100 points on Jordi Tixier in 2014, broke his femur, and still had the points lead on Tixier going into the final GP in Mexico, and with a rod in his femur and clearly doctors telling him not to, he showed up and raced the GP of Mexico, and he rode well. I mean, he had a tough first moto, but I think he got 6th in the second moto, but it still wasn't enough to hold off Tixier for the title. And I think Hurlings is referencing that and saying, like, look, there's 3 GPs to go. Yes, I have a big points lead, but really anything can happen here. Like, if I get hurt again, just like I did in 14, then it could be over. You know, it could be Tony's title at that point. So I think he's playing it smart here. I think he's looking at it big picture now and starting to kind of relax himself and realize, I mean, this world championship is within grasp, and I fully expect him to win it. I don't see who or what is going to stop him. The ground will stop him, if anything. So, yep, Hurlings look good. The Bulgarian GP in the books, and the next one is the Turkish GP, which I think is this coming weekend. I think they're doing 3 GPs back to back to back, and it's a track that none of them have ever raced before in Turkey, that I've actually never seen before, so I'm kind of interested to see what it is like and what it looks like. But I mean, anybody want to put money down against Jeffrey Hurlings? because you're basically just betting that the man crashes if you're betting against him at this point. Just total package, man. Unlike the, you know, Eli Tomac dominance that we saw in the United States, the one thing Herling seems to have going for him that Tomac does not is starts. I mean, Herling gets great starts for a pretty big dude on that 450, and of course KTM has got those starts dialed this year with Tony and him as well. But I mean, he started right at the sharp end every race. This past weekend, he gets good jumps out of the gate. He shifts through the gears good, and if I'd be really curious to see one of these GPs if Herling's got a Eli Tomac-esque start where he ended up 15th or something weird like that out of the gate, which is pretty tough to do in the GPs anyway, because if you start that far back, it's probably because you didn't have a good gate pick. The inside gate picks are super favorable in the GP series. But if a weird circumstance happens, Herlings gets a bad outside gate, which even at Ernay earlier this year, or I'm sorry, Saint-Jean-d'Angely earlier this year, it was, he had an outside gate and held it on all the way around the outside and got the whole shot. So, I mean, even from way out in the North 40s, he's still able to get a good start. But I'd be curious to see what he does if he does get a bad start and he ends up in that never-ending vortex in the middle of the field with Sewer and Anstey and all these guys, and they're all just fighting to the death, tooth and nail with each other. It'd be really interesting to see. I mean, I think that Herlings would still have almost no problem, kind of like Tomac does, but he does get good starts. This is kind of what I'm pointing out here. Speaking of Sewer and Anstey, both of them had some pretty big crashes this past weekend. Anstey was fortunate enough to get away with not T-boning the side of Jeremy Van Horbeek after he nosedived off the top of a hill, or up to the top of a hill, and then was wide open into the side of him, but got a break just in time and just tipped the back of him and went down. I think knocked the wind out of him or something like that. Took him a while to get going, but he was fine. And then Sewer also had a weird mistake where he kind of like tipped over coming out of a corner and got the bike stuck on above his leg, but he was able to remount and he was fine too. Unfortunately, it was not the same case for Calvin Villandren in the MX2 class, who's been a really good rider at the end of the season here for HRC Honda. Going to be racing for the Dutch team in the Motocross of Nations. He had, I believe it was Ben Watson, crash in front of him at one of the top of the hills, and he had nowhere to go. He was inside of this huge wall rut and clipped the back of Ben Watson's bike, got tipped off the side, and then went, you know, butt over tea kettle essentially, and had the bike land on top of his leg, and then was stuck under the bike upside down with his leg caught under it on the downside of the hill, and nobody apparently could see him sitting there, so he had a couple guys, Rubini and I think Monticelli, run him over. Or no, just Rubini, because Monticelli's 450s, I don't know what I'm talking about, but Rubini did, and that was the end of the day for Villandren, and he kind of limped off the track and said he's going to get his leg checked out sometime this week. Hopefully it's not the end of his season, and hopefully it's not bad enough that it keeps him out of Motocross of Nations, because that would be a massive blow to the Dutch team, even though Villandren's South African. But either way, a couple, you know, key points to hit on from this past weekend, and yeah, that's a synopsis of the MXGP of Bulgaria in Sevlievo this past weekend. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions, what you thought about the GP, what's going down, whether you think it's going to be Prado and Herlings to win the titles from here. Obviously 3 rounds to go, it looks like it, but maybe you guys have a different opinion, and what you guys think of everything else I might have said in this video, and whether you think I'm an idiot or not. But I appreciate you guys watching nonetheless, and thanks for watching another video here on Start Your Systems. I am Kellen, and I will see you guys in the next one. So long for now.